The icy waters of the Snake River clawed at Penelope Sutter's skin, threatening to pull her under with each desperate gasp for air. She had come here with purpose to end the pain, to silence the voices that tormented her day and night, but now her body fought against her mind's dark intentions. The current dragged her downstream, her sodden dress becoming a leaden shroud that pulled her deeper into the unforgiving embrace of the frigid Wyoming water. "If you go, you take my soul too." The shout cut through the roaring of the river and her own panicked breathing. A man on horseback galloped along the riverbank, keeping pace with her drifting form. His face was obscured by shadow beneath his wide-brimmed hat, but his voice carried a command that pierced her despair. The year was 1878, and Penelope had thought herself alone in this desolate stretch of wilderness. She had chosen this spot carefully, miles from the nearest settlement, where no one would witness her final surrender. Yet here was this stranger, this cowboy, reaching out to her both with his words and now with his arm as he guided his horse into the shallower edge of the rushing water. "Take my hand," he called, leaning dangerously from his saddle. The horse whinnied nervously but held steady under its master's firm control. "Please." Something in his voice, a raw desperation that matched her own, made Penelope reach up, her numb fingers stretching toward his outstretched hand. Their fingers brushed once, twice, and then locked together. With surprising strength, he pulled her toward him and the safety of the riverbank. As they collapsed onto the rocky shore, Penelope coughed up river water, her entire body shaking with cold and shock. The cowboy quickly removed his coat and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. "Why?" she managed to ask through chattering teeth. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" The man looked at her then, and Penelope saw his face clearly for the first time. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps only a few years older than her 22 years. His eyes were the deep blue of a summer sky, startling against his sun-weathered skin, and they held a sadness that seemed to mirror her own. "Because no soul should leave this world thinking they go unmourned," he said softly. "And the moment I saw you in those waters, I knew I couldn't bear to watch another light go out." He introduced himself as Owen Taylor, a rancher from a spread about 10 miles east. He helped her onto his horse and led them to a small campsite he'd established earlier that day. There, he built a fire that soon blazed with welcome heat and offered her a cup of strong coffee from his tin pot. "I don't want your pity," Penelope said, clutching the steaming cup with both hands. "Good," Owen replied, settling across from her. "Because I don't offer it. What I offer is an ear if you want it, or silence if you prefer." The crackling of the fire filled the space between them as Penelope considered his words. She had come west after losing everything: her family to influenza, her fiancé to another woman, her reputation to vicious rumors. The promises of a new beginning in Wyoming territory had quickly dissolved into the harsh realities of frontier life for a woman alone. "I came west for a new start," she finally said, "but I found only more pain." Owen nodded, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "The West can be cruel that way. It promises freedom but delivers isolation. It offers opportunity but demands sacrifice. What would you know of sacrifice?" The words came out harsher than she intended. Instead of taking offense, Owen rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a jagged scar that ran from wrist to elbow. 2 years ago, I held my brother as he died from a gunshot wound. We were ambushed by bandits on the trail to Denver. I took a bullet here, but Ethan." His voice trailed off. "After I buried him, I rode into the mountains intending never to return. I found a cliff much like you found this river." Penelope felt a chill that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "What stopped you?" "A wolf," Owen said with a small smile. "Sounds strange, I know. but this lone wolf appeared on the ridge above me. It just stood there watching, not threatening, just present, like it was saying, I'm alone too, but I'm still fighting. After that, I couldn't do it. As the night deepened around them, Penelope found herself sharing more of her own story, the deaths that had left her alone in the world, the betrayals that had sent her fleeing west, and the crushing disappointments that had led her to the river. Owen listened without judgment, occasionally adding wood to the fire but never interrupting. "Where will you go now?" he asked when she finally fell silent. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have nothing left." "You have tomorrow," Owen said firmly. "And I have a spare room in my cabin until you figure out what comes after that." Penelope studied him, searching for ulterior motives, but found only genuine concern. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're hurting, and I know what that's like. Sometimes, Miss Sutter, the kindness of strangers is all we have to remind us that we're not as alone as we think we are." Penelope wanted to refuse, to maintain the last shreds of her independence, but the thought of facing another day with no direction, no purpose, and no ally was more than she could bear. "Just until I find my feet," she agreed hesitantly. Owen nodded, satisfaction briefly lightening his features. "That's all I ask. Now get some rest. Dawn comes early out here." As Penelope settled into the bedroll Owen provided, she gazed up at the vast canopy of stars above. For the first time in months, the crushing weight on her chest seemed to ease slightly. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight, at least, she wasn't alone. The journey to Owen's ranch took most of the following day. They rode double on his horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding named Rusty. The closeness required by their shared mount created an unexpected intimacy. Penelope found herself acutely aware of Owen's solid presence behind her, his arm occasionally brushing hers as he adjusted the reins. The landscape around them was both brutal and beautiful. Rugged mountains punctuated the horizon, while the valley stretched out in a patchwork of sage and grass. Occasionally, they spotted antelope in the distance, their white rumps flashing as they bounded away. "It's beautiful," Penelope said, breaking a long silence. "It can be," Owen agreed. "Though it has its moods, like any living thing. This land can nurture you one day and try to kill you the next. You speak of it as if it's a person." "Out here, the land is more alive than some people I've known," he said. "It demands respect. Those who forget that rarely last long." By mid-afternoon, they crested a small rise, and Owen's ranch came into view. It was modest compared to some of the grand cattle operations that were beginning to dominate the territory, but it was well maintained. A sturdy log cabin sat nestled against a backdrop of cottonwoods, with a barn and corral nearby. A small creek meandered past, providing water for the modest herd of cattle grazing in the distance. "It's not much," Owen said, a note of pride nonetheless evident in his voice, "but it's mine. Paid for in sweat and stubbornness." "It's lovely," Penelope replied sincerely. After months of rented rooms and uncertain welcomes, the little homestead looked like paradise. As they approached, a dog came bounding out to greet them, a shaggy border collie with one blue eye and one brown. Behind it came a man who appeared to be in his 50s, his weather-beaten face breaking into a smile of welcome that quickly turned to confusion at the sight of Penelope. "Henry," Owen called out, "we have a guest who will be staying with us for a while. This is Miss Penelope Sutter." "Miss Sutter, this is Henry Wilson, my foreman and the only reason this place is still standing." Henry tipped his hat politely. "Madam, it's been a while since we had a lady's presence to brighten up the place." Penelope nodded, suddenly self-conscious in her still damp dress. "I fear I'm not very presentable at the moment." "No matter," Henry said kindly. "I'm sure we can find you something more comfortable. My late wife left some things that might serve until yours can be properly dried. Owen helped Penelope down from the horse. Henry's right. Let's get you settled, and then we can see about some hot food. You must be famished. The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while handmade furniture, a table with 4 chairs, a sofa covered in a colorful quilt, and a rocking chair filled the space. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. This was my parents' place, Owen explained as he stoked the fire. They came out here right after they married, built this cabin with their own hands. They're both gone now, Pa 5 years back, Ma just last winter. I'm sorry, Penelope said softly. Owen shrugged. That's life out here. You make your peace with death or you get crushed by it. He gestured to one of the doors. That room's yours for as long as you need it. Henry's bringing some clothes and there's a wash basin in there already. Take your time getting settled. The bedroom was small but neat, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand with basin and pitcher, and a small chest of drawers. A window looked out toward the mountains, now glowing gold in the late afternoon sun. A soft knock at the door announced Henry, who handed her a bundle of clothing. These were my Martha's. Been sitting in a trunk gathering dust these 3 years. She'd be pleased to know they're being put to use. Thank you, Penelope said, touched by the simple kindness. I'll take good care of them. Once alone, Penelope stripped off her damp dress with relief. She washed quickly in the cold water from the pitcher, then donned the borrowed clothes, a simple blue calico dress that was a bit loose but otherwise fit well enough. The familiar act of pinning up her hair and smoothing down her skirt gave her a sense of normalcy she hadn't felt in months. When she emerged, Owen was at the stove, stirring something that smelled deliciously of beef and vegetables. He looked up at her entrance, and for a moment something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, or approval. You look restored, he said simply. Hungry, starving, she admitted. They ate at the rough-hewn table, joined by Henry, who kept the conversation flowing with tales of ranch life and local gossip. The stew was hearty and filling, accompanied by fresh bread that Owen had apparently baked himself. You cook? Penelope couldn't hide her surprise. Out here you learn to do everything, Owen replied. Or you go hungry or naked, or both, Henry chuckled. Don't let him fool you, Miss Sutter. The boy's got talents, makes the best biscuits this side of the continental divide. I look forward to trying them, Penelope said, finding herself smiling for what felt like the first time in ages. After dinner, Henry retired to his small cabin near the barn, leaving Penelope and Owen alone. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the fire. Thank you, Penelope said finally, for everything. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along when you did. I know exactly what would have happened, Owen said quietly, and I'm glad I was there to prevent it. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I meant what I said by the river, Penelope. When I saw you in those waters, something in me couldn't bear the thought of you slipping away. The intensity in his gaze made Penelope look away. You don't even know me. I know enough to recognize a kindred spirit, he replied. Someone who's seen more than their fair share of pain. And what now? She asked. What am I supposed to do with this life you've handed back to me? Owen considered her question thoughtfully. Live it, one day at a time. Find something that makes tomorrow worth seeing. Is that what you did? After the wolf, he nodded. I came back here, threw myself into the ranch. It wasn't easy at first. Some days I still woke up wondering why I bothered. But eventually I found reasons. Small ones at first, a beautiful sunrise, a new calf being born, the satisfaction of a job well done. Later, bigger ones. Like what? Penelope found herself genuinely curious. A smile tugged at the corner of Owen's mouth. Like the possibility that one day I might be able to help someone else who was standing at the edge of their own cliff. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Penelope felt a tightness in her throat, a mixture of gratitude and something else she couldn't quite name. "I should get some rest," she said finally. "It's been a long day." Owen nodded. "Of course. Sleep well, Penelope." As she settled into the unfamiliar bed, Penelope realized that for the first time in months, she was actually looking forward to seeing what the morning might bring. The next days fell into a rhythm that Penelope found surprisingly comforting. She woke each morning to the smell of coffee and the sounds of the ranch coming to life. Owen was always up before dawn, attending to chores before breakfast. Henry would join them for the morning meal, during which they would discuss the day's tasks. At first, Penelope felt awkward and uncertain of her place. But by the third day, she had taken over the cooking, grateful to have a way to contribute. She found the cabin's small herb garden neglected but salvageable and spent hours weeding and tending it. The physical labor was exhausting, but satisfying in a way her previous life had never been. Owen seemed pleased by her initiatives, but never pressured her. He spent most days out with the cattle or repairing fences and equipment, returning in the evenings covered in dust, but with a contentment that spoke of work well done. They began to share more of their stories during these evening hours. Penelope learned that Owen had been born on this ranch, the middle of 3 brothers. The eldest had died in the war, fighting for the Union. The youngest, Ethan, had been the one killed by bandits. His parents had worked the land until their deaths, leaving Owen alone but for Henry, who had been with the family since before Owen was born. In turn, Penelope told him about her childhood in Boston, her father's shipping business that had flourished and then failed after his death, leaving her mother and her destitute. Her mother's subsequent illness and death had coincided with her fiancé's betrayal, leaving Penelope completely alone. "So you came west," Owen said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. "I answered an advertisement," Penelope explained, "for a school teacher in a town called Prosperity Junction. It sounded promising, a growing community in need of educated women." "I know the place," Owen said with a frown. "It's about 60 miles south of here, not the kind of town I'd send a lady alone." Penelope gave a bitter laugh. "I discovered that too late." The school was nothing more than a half-built shack. The town was mostly saloons and brothels. The man who placed the advertisement, a Mr. Garner, made it clear that teaching children was only part of what he expected from me. Owen's jaw tightened. "Harold Garner, he's got a reputation." "Yes, well, I declined his generous offer," Penelope said dryly. "But by then, I had spent nearly all my money getting there. I found work as a seamstress at one of the less disreputable establishments, but—" She trailed off, the memory still painful. "But it wasn't enough," Owen finished for her. "No. And when rumors started about my virtue simply because I lived alone and had no husband or family to vouch for me, the decent work dried up. The only offers I received were ones no respectable woman would accept. So you left." "I left," she confirmed. "I had just enough for a stagecoach ticket to the next town. From there I walked, for days, until I reached that river." Owen was silent for a long moment. Garner should be held accountable for his deception. Perhaps. But he's just one man in a world that seems designed to break women who dare to stand alone. She hadn't meant to sound so bitter, but the words came out sharp as knives. "Not everyone is like that," Owen said quietly. "There are good people too, like you," Penelope asked, half teasing. "I try to be," he replied seriously. My mother taught me that character is what you do when no one's watching, and my father added that it's also what you do when everyone is. The simple wisdom in his words touched something in Penelope. They sound like remarkable people. They were. Owen's gaze drifted to the darkening horizon. They taught me to see the value in every life, including my own. It took me a while to learn that lesson properly. As darkness fell completely, they remained on the porch, the silence between them comfortable now rather than awkward. Penelope found herself studying Owen's profile in the dim light from the window, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crook in his nose from what he'd told her, was a fall from a horse in his youth. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. She caught herself with a start. These were not the observations of someone merely grateful for rescue. These were the noticings of a woman becoming attracted to a man. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. After all she'd been through, the idea of making herself vulnerable again seemed foolish at best, dangerous at worst. And yet, there was something about Owen Taylor that made her want to risk it. "Penny, for your thoughts," Owen said suddenly, turning to catch her studying him. Flustered, Penelope looked away. "I was just thinking about how strange life is. A week ago I was ready to end everything, and now—" "And now," he prompted when she didn't continue. "Now I'm sitting on a porch watching stars appear, wondering what tomorrow will bring. And actually wanting to find out." Owen's smile was warm enough to chase away the evening chill. "That sounds like progress to me." The days stretched into weeks, and spring bloomed fully across the valley. Penelope found herself settling into ranch life with surprising ease. She expanded her duties beyond cooking and gardening, learning to milk the cow Owen kept for fresh dairy and even helping with the gentler horses in the corral. One morning, Owen appeared at breakfast with a proposition. "I need to ride out to check the north pasture. Thought you might like to come along. It's a beautiful ride and you've been cooped up around the cabin for weeks now." Penelope hesitated. She hadn't been on a horse since arriving at the ranch. "I'm not much of a rider." "Daisy's as gentle as they come," Owen assured her. "And it would do you good to see more of the place." The idea was tempting. The valley had been showing off its spring finery, and Penelope had found herself increasingly curious about the lands beyond the immediate surroundings of the cabin. "All right," she agreed. "But don't expect me to keep up with you." Owen's grin was boyish. "I'll stay right beside you the whole time." After breakfast, they made their way to the stable where Owen saddled Rusty for himself and a placid gray mare for Penelope. He helped her mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist, lingering perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. The brief contact sent a flutter through Penelope's stomach that had nothing to do with nerves about riding. True to his word, Owen kept his horse at a walk beside hers as they set out across the valley. The day was perfect clear blue skies, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers, and sunshine warm on their faces. "This land has been in my family for almost 30 years, Owen told her as they rode. "My father came west after meeting my mother in St. Louis. She was half Cheyenne, taught him everything about living in harmony with this country." "Your mother was native?" Penelope asked, surprised. Owen nodded. "Her father was a fur trader who actually married the Cheyenne woman he fell in love with, rather than just taking her as so many did. My mother was raised in both worlds. She spoke 4 languages and could track game better than any man I've ever known." Penelope smiled, imagining this remarkable woman. "She sounds amazing." "She was," Owen agreed, a note of pride in his voice. "She used to say that this land speaks if you know how to listen. The plants, the animals, the weather, they all have stories to tell." As they crested a small hill, the valley opened up before them in a breathtaking panorama. Wildflowers carpeted the ground in splashes of blue, yellow, and purple. In the distance, a herd of antelope grazed peacefully. "It's incredible," Penelope breathed. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Owen confessed. "When things get overwhelming, I come here to remind myself of why I stay." They dismounted to let the horses graze, and Owen spread a blanket on the ground. From his saddlebag, he produced a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried apples. As they ate, Penelope found herself studying Owen again. The sunlight brought out auburn highlights in his brown hair, and the openness of his expression made him appear younger than his 27 years. "What will you do?" he asked suddenly. "When you decide to move on, I mean." The question caught Penelope off guard. She hadn't thought about leaving in days. "I don't know," she admitted. "I came west to teach, but that didn't exactly work out." "You could still teach," Owen suggested. "There's a proper town about 20 miles east of here, Riverspend. They've been trying to establish a school for over a year now. Last I heard, they still hadn't found someone suitable." "You think I should apply?" Owen shrugged, picking at a blade of grass. "If that's what you want. You'd be good at it, I think. You're patient, smart." "How would you know?" Penelope asked, genuinely curious. "You've never seen me teach." "I've seen how you explain things to Henry when you're showing him a new recipe, and I've watched you with the animals. You have a natural way of instructing without making someone feel foolish for not already knowing." The observation was surprisingly astute, and Penelope felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "I did love teaching the few times I had the opportunity. But I'm not sure I'm ready to face another town alone." "You wouldn't be alone," Owen said quickly. "Riverspend is close enough that—" He stopped abruptly, looking away. "Close enough that what?" Penelope prompted. Owen met her gaze again, something vulnerable in his eyes. "Close enough that you could still consider this place your home, if you wanted to." The implication hung in the air between them. This wasn't just about a teaching position. This was Owen offering her a permanent place in his life. "Owen," Penelope began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say. "You don't have to answer now," he interrupted. "Or ever if you don't want to. I want you to know that you have options, and that I've grown accustomed to having you around." His lips quirked in a half-smile. "More than accustomed, if I'm being honest." Penelope's heart hammered in her chest. "I've grown accustomed to being here, too," she admitted softly. Before either could say more, the peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Owen was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the revolver at his hip that Penelope had never seen him draw. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice suddenly hard. 3 riders appeared over the rise, moving at a leisurely pace. They pulled up short at the sight of Owen and Penelope. "Well, well," the lead rider called, "if it isn't Taylor, and with company no less." Owen's posture remained tense. "Garner, you're a long way from Prosperity Junction." Penelope felt her blood run cold at the name. Harold Garner, the man who had lured her west under false pretenses. Garner's gaze shifted to Penelope, and a slow smile spread across his face as recognition dawned. "Miss Sutter, what a pleasant surprise. I've been wondering where you disappeared to." "You know each other?" Owen asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Mr. Garner was the one who advertised for a teacher," Penelope said, stepping forward to stand beside Owen rather than behind him. She would not cower. "A position still open, my dear," Garner said smoothly, "though I see you found alternative employment." His insinuating tone made the innocent words sound filthy. Owen's hand tightened on his gun. "State your business and move on, Garner. You're trespassing on my land." Garner chuckled, apparently unconcerned by the threat. "Just passing through on our way back from Riverspend. Had some business to attend to there." He tipped his hat mockingly. Don't let us interrupt your picnic." As they turned to leave, Garner called back over his shoulder, "By the way, Miss Sutter, you might be interested to know that Riverspend is no longer in need of a teacher." Tragic accident with the schoolhouse. Fire. Nothing left but ashes. Owen waited until the riders were well out of sight before holstering his weapon. "We should head back," he said grimly. "I don't like that Garner's been in Riverspend, or that he found us here." The ride back to the ranch was tense and silent. Penelope's mind raced with questions and fears. Had Garner been searching for her specifically? What did he mean about the schoolhouse fire? And why did Owen seem so on edge? Henry was waiting anxiously when they returned. "Saw riders heading south," he reported. "Thought you should know." Garner and 2 of his men, Owen confirmed, helping Penelope down from her horse. "We ran into them at the North Ridge." Henry's weathered face darkened. "That explains it then." "Explains what?" Penelope asked. "While you were gone, Matt Lewis rode over from the Peterson place. Said there was trouble in Riverspend last night. Schoolhouse burned down. The town saying it was deliberately set." Owen cursed under his breath. Garner's expanding his territory, trying to keep decent folks from settling. "Why would he do that?" Penelope asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Because legitimate businesses and families are bad for his type of operation," Owen explained. "He runs saloons, brothels, and gambling houses. He makes his real money controlling the opium trade from the coast to the mining towns. Prosperity Junction is his base, but he's always looking to expand. And schools, churches, proper law enforcement, they threaten his business," Henry added. Penelope felt sick. "And I almost walked right into his trap." Owen's expression softened as he looked at her. "You couldn't have known. Men like Garner are expert manipulators." "But now he knows I'm here," Penelope said, the realization filling her with dread. "And he seemed interested in finding me." "He won't touch you," Owen said with quiet intensity. "I promise you that." That night, Penelope had trouble sleeping. The day's events had stirred up all the fears and uncertainties she'd begun to put behind her. The encounter with Garner had been a harsh reminder of how vulnerable she still was in this wild country. A soft knock at her door startled her from her troubled thoughts. "Penelope," Owen's voice was low. "Are you awake?" She pulled a shawl around her nightdress and opened the door. Owen stood there in his shirt sleeves, looking as sleepless as she felt. "I heard you moving around," he explained. "Thought you might want some company or tea. I made tea." The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to Penelope's eyes. "Tea would be nice," she managed. They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from their cups in the dim light of a single lamp. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows. "I'm sorry about today," Owen said after a while. "I wanted to show you the beauty of this place, not remind you of what you were running from." "It's not your fault," Penelope assured him. "And I did see the beauty. I won't let Garner taint that memory." Owen reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You're stronger than you realize, Penelope Sutter." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading up her arm. "Only because I've had someone believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Owen's eyes held hers, and Penelope felt something shift between them, a barrier falling away, a possibility opening up. "I meant what I said earlier," he said softly, "about you having a place here. For as long as you want it." Penelope turned her hand beneath his so their palms met, fingers intertwining. "And if what I want is to stay, not just for now, but indefinitely." The hope that bloomed on Owen's face was answer enough, but his words confirmed it. "Then I would be the happiest man in Wyoming territory." He leaned across the table slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But Penelope didn't want to pull away. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find you," he whispered. "Especially not in that river." "I never expected to be found," Penelope replied. "Especially by someone who could see past all my broken pieces." "Your broken pieces match mine," Owen said simply. "Together, maybe we make something whole." Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the cabin, Penelope had never felt more sheltered. For the first time since she could remember, the future didn't look like a threat. It looked like a promise. The following weeks brought a burst of activity to the ranch. Spring roundup was approaching, and Owen and Henry were busy from dawn until dusk preparing. Penelope threw herself into making the cabin more of a home, cleaning out years of bachelor neglect, and adding small touches that brought color and comfort to the rustic space. They settled into a new rhythm, one that now included stolen kisses in the kitchen, lingering touches as they passed each other, and quiet conversations that lasted late into the night. Owen was respectful, never pushing for more than Penelope was ready to give, but his desire for her was evident in the way his eyes followed her movements, in the catch of his breath when she stood close. For her part, Penelope found herself falling deeper in love with each passing day. Owen's steady strength, his quiet kindness, and his unwavering support created a safety she had never known before. Even in Boston, among so-called civilized society, she had never felt so valued for exactly who she was. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Owen took her hand. "I've been thinking," he began, a note of nervousness in his voice that Penelope had never heard before. "The spring cattle drive to Cheyenne starts next week. I usually go with Henry and the other hands we hire, but this year—" He hesitated. "This year I'm reluctant to leave." "Because of Garner?" Penelope asked. "Partly," Owen admitted, "but mostly because I can't bear the thought of being away from you for 3 weeks. Penelope squeezed his hand. "I'll miss you too, but I understand. The drive is important for the ranch." "It is," Owen agreed, "which is why I have a proposition for you." He turned to face her fully. "Come with me to Cheyenne. We can be married there, make it official before God and everyone. And then, when we return, no one can question your place here, not Garner, not anyone." Penelope's heart leaped at the words, but a lifetime of caution made her hesitate. "Owen, are you certain? We've known each other such a short time." "I've never been more certain of anything," he said, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. "I know it hasn't been long, but I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life without knowing it. When I saw you in that river, something in me recognized something in you. As if my soul knew yours already." Tears pricked Penelope's eyes at the simple beauty of his words. "I feel it too," she whispered, "but marriage is such a serious step." "It is," Owen agreed, "and I wouldn't suggest it if I wasn't absolutely sure, but Penelope, I love you. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I pulled you from that river, and every day since has only confirmed what my heart already knew." "I love you too," Penelope said, the words coming easily now that they were finally spoken. "But what about my past? The rumors that followed me from Prosperity Junction are nothing but lies spread by a man who didn't get what he wanted," Owen finished firmly. "And anyone who would believe them isn't worth our concern." He took both her hands in his. "I'm not asking you to answer right away. Think about it. But know that whether you say yes now, or a month from now, or a year from now, my heart is yours. It has been since that day by the river when I told you the truth. If you go, you take my soul too." Penelope leaned forward and kissed him, trying to pour all her feelings into the gesture. When they parted, she kept her hands on either side of his face, looking deeply into his eyes. "Yes," she said simply, I'll marry you in Cheyenne." Owen's smile was radiant. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in his excitement. "You've made me the happiest man alive, Penelope Sutter." "Soon to be Penelope Taylor," she corrected, laughing as he spun her around. Their joy was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Owen set Penelope down, instantly alert. Since their encounter with Garner, any unexpected visitors put them on edge. Relief washed over his face as the riders came into view. "It's just Matt Lewis and John Peterson," he told Penelope. "Neighbors from the next valley over." The men dismounted, tipping their hats politely to Penelope before turning to Owen with serious expressions. "Sorry to disturb you, Taylor," the older man, Peterson, said, "but we've got trouble brewing. Thought you should know." Owen invited them inside, where Penelope quickly provided coffee. The men settled around the table, their faces grim in the lamplight. "Garner's men have been making the rounds," Peterson explained, "visiting all the smaller ranches, making offers to buy land. When folks refuse, accidents start happening. Cattle get scattered, water sources get fouled, that sort of thing. They came to my place yesterday," Lewis added. "Got real unfriendly when I told them I wasn't selling. This morning I found one of my best horses with its throat cut." Owen's jaw tightened. "They're pushing everyone out to expand their territory." "Not just that," Peterson said. "Word is the railroad's planning a spur line through the valley. Whoever controls the land where the depot gets built stands to make a fortune. And Garner wants to be that someone," Owen concluded. "Most of the smaller outfits are considering selling," Lewis said. "Can't blame them. It's hard enough making a living out here without fighting a war too." "What about Riverspend?" Penelope asked. "Surely the townspeople won't stand for this." Peterson shook his head. "Town's divided. Some want to fight, others just want peace at any cost. And with the schoolhouse gone and the teacher who was coming getting word not to bother, families are starting to leave. It's a systematic takeover," Owen muttered. "Drive out the decent folk, bring in the gambling and the brothels, control the rail access." "We're organizing a meeting," Peterson said. "Day after tomorrow at my place. All the ranchers and townspeople who want to stand against Garner. Thought you might want to be there." Owen nodded. "Count me in." After the men left, Penelope found Owen standing on the porch, staring out into the darkness with a troubled expression. "This changes things," he said as she joined him. "I can't leave for Cheyenne now, not with Garner making his move." "I understand," Penelope assured him. "The drive can wait." Owen turned to her, taking her hands. "But our marriage doesn't have to. There's a circuit preacher coming through Riverspend next Sunday. We could be married then, right here with our friends as witnesses." The idea of a simple ceremony surrounded by people who genuinely cared for them appealed to Penelope far more than a formal wedding in Cheyenne. "I'd like that," she said softly. Owen's smile returned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "At least something good will come from all this." Later that night, as Penelope prepared for bed, she found herself thinking about the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. If Owen hadn't found her that day in the river, she would never have known this happiness, this sense of belonging. The thought of that alternative was almost unbearable now. Yet the threat from Garner cast a shadow over their joy. Penelope couldn't shake the feeling that he had a personal interest in finding her, one that went beyond his usual business dealings. The way he had looked at her during their encounter on the ridge had sent chills down her spine. A soft tap at her window startled her from her thoughts. Penelope froze, listening. It came again, a deliberate, quiet tap against the glass. Heart pounding, she crept to the window and cautiously pulled back the curtain. Relief flooded her at the sight of Owen standing outside, moonlight silvering his features. He gestured for her to open the window. "What are you doing?" she whispered as she complied. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Too much on my mind. Thought I'd check if you were still awake. By tapping on my window like a lovesick boy, Penelope couldn't help but smile. Owen's answering grin was sheepish. Maybe I am a bit lovesick, and I wanted to give you something. He held up a small object that gleamed in the moonlight. It was my mother's. I've been saving it for the right moment. He placed a ring in her palm, a simple band of gold with a small, perfect pearl set in the center. It's beautiful, Penelope breathed. She always said the pearl reminded her that beauty can come from adversity, Owen explained. The oyster turns an irritation into something precious, like you've done with your hardships. Tears blurred Penelope's vision as she slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I'll treasure it always. Owen leaned through the window and kissed her gently. 4 more days until you're my wife, he murmured against her lips. 4 days, she echoed, the words a promise. After Owen had gone, Penelope lay awake, the pearl on her finger catching the moonlight. Despite the troubles brewing, a deep contentment settled over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The meeting at Peterson's ranch the following evening drew a larger crowd than expected. Ranchers from across the valley, shopkeepers from Riversbend, and even a few miners from the hills to the north packed into the large barn. Penelope stayed close to Owen's side, aware of the curious glances directed her way. As the only woman present, she stood out, but Owen's protective presence and the simple pearl on her finger gave her confidence. Sheriff Thomas Whitaker from Riversbend, a gray-haired man with a weathered face and steady eyes, called the meeting to order. Folks, we all know why we're here. Harold Garner is making a play for control of this valley, and he's not being particular about his methods. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. In the past month, the sheriff continued, we've had the schoolhouse burned down, 3 ranchers intimidated into selling. The stagecoach line threatened to the point they're considering canceling service to Riversbend. And just yesterday, Matt Lewis lost a valuable horse to Garner's brand of persuasion. What do you propose we do? Someone called from the back. Garner's got at least 15 gunmen on his payroll. And he's got the territorial judge in his pocket, another added. No point appealing to the law. Sheriff Whitaker held up his hands. The law may be compromised at the territorial level, but we still have options. I've telegraphed the federal marshal's office in Cheyenne. They're sending someone to investigate. When? Peterson demanded. After Garner's burned us all out. The marshal should arrive within 2 weeks, Whitaker replied. In the meantime, I'm proposing we organize ourselves. Regular patrols, a warning system, and a commitment to stand together. Garner preys on isolated homesteaders and businesses. He's less likely to move against a united front. The discussion that followed was heated but productive. Men volunteered for patrol shifts, signals were established, and a plan began to take shape. Through it all, Owen remained quiet, listening intently but offering little. When the formal meeting broke up and people gathered in smaller groups, Sheriff Whitaker approached Owen and Penelope. Taylor, he greeted, extending his hand. Good to see you getting involved. You've kept to yourself too much since your brother's passing. Owen shook the offered hand. Times change, Sheriff. Can't afford to stand apart anymore. Whitaker's gaze shifted to Penelope, curiosity evident in his expression. This is my fiancée, Miss Penelope Sutter, Owen introduced her. We're to be married this Sunday. The sheriff's eyebrows rose slightly, but his smile was genuine as he tipped his hat. Madam, that's the best news I've heard in weeks. This valley could use more good women to civilize it. Thank you, Penelope replied, warming to the man's straightforward manner. Though I'm not sure how civilizing I'll be, I seem to be adapting to frontier life rather than the other way around. Whitaker chuckled. That's even better. The West changes us all one way or another. The ones who thrive are those who bend without breaking. His words reminded Penelope of what Owen had said about his mother, how she had found a way to live in harmony with the land rather than trying to conquer it. "Sheriff," Owen said, his voice lowering, "there's something you should know about Garner. He has a particular interest in Penelope." Briefly, Owen explained Penelope's history with Garner and their encounter on the ridge. Whitaker listened with growing concern. "That complicates things," he admitted when Owen finished. "Garner doesn't like being denied, especially by a woman. And if he's made the connection between Miss Sutter and you, he might see this as an opportunity to settle two scores at once." "What do you mean?" Penelope asked. The sheriff and Owen exchanged a look that suggested there was more to the story. "Owen and Garner have history," Whitaker explained. "It was Owen's testimony that sent one of Garner's key men to prison 3 years back. The man died there." Penelope turned to Owen in surprise. "You never mentioned this." "It was before." Owen hesitated. "Before Ethan, before the cliff. I didn't think it mattered anymore." "It matters now," Whitaker said grimly. "Garner's been looking for a way to get back at you ever since. Finding Miss Sutter with you must have seemed like a gift." The implications chilled Penelope to the bone. "So I've put Owen in more danger just by being with him." "No," Owen said firmly, taking her hand. "If anything, it's the other way around. My past is complicating your fresh start." "Either way," Whitaker interjected, "you both need to be extra careful until the marshal arrives. I'd feel better if you'd consider staying in town for a while where there are more people around." Owen shook his head. "The ranch is our home. I won't be driven off it." The sheriff sighed, clearly having expected this response. "Then at least accept some help. I can spare a deputy to stay with you until after the wedding." "That won't be necessary," Owen began, but Penelope squeezed his hand. "It might be wise," she suggested quietly, "at least for a few days." After a moment's hesitation, Owen nodded. "All right, but just until Sunday." As they rode home later that night, accompanied by a young deputy named Michael Collins, Penelope found herself scanning the darkness beyond the pool of light cast by their lanterns. The knowledge that Garner might be specifically targeting them had transformed the familiar landscape into something menacing. "You're quiet," Owen observed as they neared the ranch. "Just thinking," Penelope replied, "about how quickly everything has changed. A month ago, I was ready to end my life. Now I have so much to live for and so much to lose." Owen reached across the space between their horses to touch her arm. "We won't lose it, I promise." But as they approached the ranch, a flickering orange glow on the horizon turned that promise to ash. Fire was consuming the barn, flames reaching hungrily toward the night sky. "Henry!" Owen shouted, spurring his horse forward. They found the foreman bloodied but alive, struggling to control the panicked horses that had escaped the burning structure. "3 men," Henry gasped as Owen helped him to safety. "Came out of nowhere. Said to tell you this was just the beginning, that Garner wants what's his." Deputy Collins immediately rode for help while Owen and Penelope worked with Henry to save what animals they could. By the time neighbors arrived to help battle the blaze, it was too late to save the barn, but they managed to keep the fire from spreading to the cabin and other outbuildings. In the gray light of dawn, the destruction was starkly visible. The barn was nothing but smoldering ruins. 2 horses hadn't made it out. Their charred remains a grim reminder of the night's violence. Equipment, feed, and tack, all essential for the ranch's operation, had been destroyed. Owen stood amid the devastation, his face streaked with soot and his eyes hard as flint. When Penelope approached him, he turned to her with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of rage, determination, and fear. "This ends now," he said, his voice rough from smoke and emotion. "I won't wait for Garner to escalate further. You and Henry need to go to Riversbend, stay with Sheriff Whitaker until this is resolved." "And where will you be?" Penelope asked, though she already knew the answer. Prosperity Junction. "It's time Garner and I had a reckoning." "No." The word came out sharper than Penelope intended. "That's exactly what he wants, to draw you out, separate us. We stay together. Penelope, I didn't survive that river just to lose you to a man like Garner," she interrupted. "We face this together or not at all." For a long moment, Owen said nothing, the muscle in his jaw working as he fought an internal battle. Finally, his shoulders slumped slightly. "Together, then," he conceded. "But not here. The cabin's too vulnerable. We'll go to Riversbend as the sheriff suggested." Relief flooded through Penelope. "When do we leave?" "As soon as Henry's fit to travel," Owen replied, glancing at the foreman who was having his head wound tended by one of the neighboring ranchers. "And we'll need to bring the remaining horses. I won't leave them for Garner's men to slaughter." By midday, they were ready. Henry, despite his protests, was loaded into a wagon driven by Matt Lewis. Penelope and Owen would follow on horseback, leading the 5 remaining horses from the ranch. Deputy Collins and 2 other men volunteered to ride with them as additional protection. As they prepared to depart, Owen took one last look at the cabin, the home his parents had built, the place where he had found Penelope, where they had fallen in love. Determination hardened his features. "We'll be back," he promised, as much to himself as to Penelope. "This isn't over." The journey to Riversbend normally took half a day, but with the wounded Henry and the string of extra horses, they moved slowly. The sun was low on the horizon by the time the small settlement came into view, a collection of wooden buildings strung along a single main street, with scattered homes and businesses extending outward. Sheriff Whitaker met them at the edge of town, his expression grim as he took in their appearance and the wagon carrying Henry. "We've prepared rooms at the hotel," he told them, helping Owen ease Henry down from the wagon. "The doctor's waiting there. And we've arranged space for your horses at the livery." "Thank you," Owen said, the simple words heavy with gratitude. The hotel was modest but clean, a 2-story wooden structure in the center of town. The proprietor, a plump woman named Mrs. Holloway, fussed over them, providing hot water for washing and promising a hot meal once they were settled. "You'll be wanting separate rooms until Sunday, of course," she said to Owen and Penelope, her expression making it clear this was not a question. "Of course," Owen agreed, too exhausted to argue about proprieties. Penelope was shown to a small room on the 2nd floor with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window overlooking the main street. After the long day, even these simple accommodations seemed luxurious. She washed away the soot and dust from the fire and changed into fresh clothes from the small bag she had packed. A knock at her door announced Mrs. Holloway with a tray of food, a thick beef stew, fresh bread, and a slice of apple pie. "Eat up, dear," the older woman urged. "You look like you could use a good meal, and don't you worry about a thing. Sheriff Whitaker's got men watching the hotel, and this whole town stands with you against that awful Garner." Penelope thanked her, touched by the kindness of these strangers. After Mrs. Holloway left, another, softer knock came at the door. Owen stood there, similarly cleaned up but with shadows of exhaustion beneath his eyes. "May I come in?" he asked. "Just for a moment. I know it's not proper, but..." Penelope pulled him inside, closing the door behind him. "Proper seems the least of our concerns right now." Owen's arms went around her, holding her tightly as if reassuring himself that she was really there, safe and whole. Penelope returned the embrace, feeling some of the day's tension begin to ease. "Henry's resting," Owen told her. Doctor says he'll be fine. Concussion and some cuts, but nothing that won't heal. Thank God, Penelope murmured against his chest. The sheriff wants to meet with us in the morning, Owen continued. Plan our next steps. The marshal is expected within the week, but Whitaker doesn't want to wait that long to take action. What kind of action? Owen pulled back slightly to look at her. A show of force, perhaps. Enough men to make Garner think twice about further attacks. At least until the marshal arrives with federal authority. And our wedding? Penelope asked, suddenly remembering that Sunday was just 3 days away. A genuine smile broke through Owen's weariness. Still on. The preacher's already in town, staying at the church. Mrs. Holloway's apparently planning quite a celebration. Seems the whole town is determined to see us properly married, come hell or high water. Or Harold Garner, Penelope added wryly. Owen's smile faded. He won't stop our wedding, I promise you that. As if to seal that promise, he kissed her, a kiss that spoke of his determination to protect their future together despite the obstacles. When they finally parted, Penelope kept her hands on his face, memorizing every line and plain. Eat your dinner, she instructed gently. Then get some rest. Tomorrow will be soon enough to face whatever comes next. After Owen left, Penelope sat by the window, watching the quiet street below as she ate. Riversbend seemed peaceful enough, with a few people still moving about on evening errands, lamps being lit in windows, and the distant sounds of piano music from what was probably the town's saloon. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that this calm was merely the eye of a storm. Garner had made his move against them personally, and from what she had learned of the man, he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted or was forced to retreat. The question that troubled her most was what, exactly, did Harold Garner want? Was it really just about expanding his territory and controlling the future railroad? Or was there something more personal in his vendetta against Owen and now, by extension, against her? As she prepared for bed, Penelope's thoughts drifted to the river where Owen had found her. How strange that her lowest moment had led to her greatest happiness, and how determined she was to fight for that happiness. No matter what came next, morning brought a flurry of activity to Riversbend. Penelope woke to the sounds of horses and wagons in the street below, voices calling greetings, and the general bustle of a town coming to life. After dressing quickly, she made her way downstairs to find Owen already in the hotel's small dining room, deep in conversation with Sheriff Whitaker and several other men. They looked up as she entered, and Owen rose to greet her, taking her hand and leading her to the table. Penelope, you remember Sheriff Whitaker. This is Mayor Clark, Reverend Phillips, and Dr. Morris. Each man nodded politely as he was introduced. The mayor, a portly man with impressive mustaches, beamed at her. Miss Sutter, it's a pleasure. We're all looking forward to your wedding on Sunday. It's just the kind of joyful occasion this town needs right now. Thank you, Penelope replied, somewhat overwhelmed by the warm welcome. I appreciate everyone's kindness. It's the least we can do, Reverend Phillips assured her. He was younger than she had expected for a frontier preacher, perhaps in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a scholarly air. After all you've been through. Penelope shot a questioning look at Owen, who had the grace to look slightly abashed. I may have shared a bit of our story with the Reverend while making arrangements for Sunday. Nothing improper, the Reverend hastened to add. Just enough to explain the urgency and to help me understand the significance of the ceremony for you both. Before Penelope could respond, Mrs. Holloway appeared with coffee and a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. Eat up, dear, she urged. You'll need your strength. We've got dress fittings this afternoon. Dress fittings, Penelope echoed in surprise. For your wedding gown, of course, Mrs. Holloway said as if this were obvious. Can't have you getting married in traveling clothes. My daughter left her dress when she moved to Denver with her husband. With a few alterations, it should fit you perfectly." Touched by the generosity, Penelope found herself at a loss for words. "That's incredibly kind," she finally managed. "It's settled then," Mrs. Holloway declared. "You come find me after breakfast and we'll get started." With that, she bustled away to attend to other guests. "It seems the whole town has adopted you," Owen remarked with a smile. "And we protect our own," Sheriff Whitaker added more soberly. "Which brings us back to the matter at hand. Mayor Clark has authorized me to deputize additional men. We're organizing a force to ride to Prosperity Junction tomorrow." "To do what exactly?" Penelope asked, concerned. "Deliver a message," the sheriff explained. "Make it clear to Garner that his actions against you and Owen, and by extension, against this community, won't be tolerated. Let him know the marshal is coming, and that federal charges will be filed for the arson and assault." "You think that will stop him?" Owen sounded skeptical. "It might give him pause," Mayor Clark suggested. "Garner's ambitious, but he's not stupid. He knows open warfare is bad for business." "And if it doesn't stop him?" Penelope pressed. A moment of uncomfortable silence followed her question. "Then we'll be ready," Sheriff Whitaker said finally. "Every able-bodied man in town is armed and on alert. We've posted lookouts on all approaches to Riverspend. If Garner or his men try anything, they'll find us prepared." After breakfast, Penelope was swept away by Mrs. Holloway for wedding preparations, while Owen remained with the men to discuss security arrangements. The next few hours passed in a blur of fabric, pins, and feminine chatter as Mrs. Holloway and several other ladies from town worked to alter the wedding dress. "It's a bit old-fashioned," Mrs. Holloway admitted as she pinned the bodice. "But with these adjustments, it'll look like it was made for you." The dress was indeed from another era, ivory silk with delicate lace overlays and a modestly scooped neckline. But as the alterations progressed, Penelope had to admit it was beautiful in its simplicity. "Owen won't be able to take his eyes off you," declared a young woman introduced as the schoolteacher's wife. "Not that he can anyway. We all saw how he looks at you at breakfast." Penelope blushed at the observation. "We haven't known each other very long," she confessed. "Sometimes it feels like we're rushing into this." "Nonsense," Mrs. Holloway said firmly. "When it's right, it's right. My Harold and I knew after 2 weeks. Been married 37 years before he passed. Besides," added another woman, "life out here is uncertain. You grab happiness when and where you find it." By mid-afternoon, the dress alterations were well underway, and Penelope was released from her fitting session. She found Owen at the livery stable, checking on their horses and speaking with Henry, who was up and about despite the bandage still wrapped around his head. "You should be resting," she scolded the foreman gently. Henry gave her a crooked smile. "Can't lie abed while there's work to be done, Miss Penelope. Besides, the doc says I'm hard-headed enough that a little knock won't do me lasting harm." Owen looked up from examining one of the horse's hooves. "How were the wedding preparations?" "Overwhelming," Penelope admitted. "I had no idea we'd have such a proper ceremony. Mrs. Holloway has practically adopted me." "She does that," Henry chuckled. "Did the same for Owen's mother when she first came to these parts. Not everyone was welcoming to a half-Cheyenne woman, but Mrs. Holloway never saw anything but another soul in need of friendship." The mention of Owen's mother reminded Penelope of the pearl ring on her finger. She twisted it thoughtfully. "I wish I could have known her." "She would have liked you," Owen said, coming to stand beside her. Strong women recognize each other. A commotion in the street drew their attention. A rider was galloping into town, his horse lathered with sweat. He pulled up outside the sheriff's office, shouting for Whitaker. Owen frowned. "Stay here," he instructed, moving quickly toward the gathering crowd. But Penelope had no intention of being left behind. She followed, arriving in time to hear the riders' news. "Garner's men attacked the Peterson place at dawn," the man was saying, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "Burned the house, shot up the cattle. Peterson and his oldest boy are wounded. The rest of the family's on their way here now." Sheriff Whitaker's face darkened with anger. "Any casualties?" The rider shook his head. "No, thank God, but it was close. Peterson says they came specifically looking for Taylor." His gaze found Owen in the crowd. "Said to tell you Garner's patience is running thin. He wants the woman, and he wants you to pay for what you did to his operation." All eyes turned to Owen and Penelope. The whispers that rippled through the gathering made it clear that their private concerns had now become very public. Sheriff Whitaker took charge of the situation. "All right, everyone. We knew Garner might make another move. This changes our timeline, not our plan. I want all volunteers for tomorrow's ride to meet at my office in 1 hour. The rest of you continue with the preparations we discussed. This town stands together." As the crowd dispersed, Owen pulled Penelope aside, his expression troubled. "This is escalating faster than I anticipated." "He's coming for us specifically," Penelope said, the reality of the situation sinking in. "For me." Owen's jaw tightened. "He won't get what he wants, not you, not submission, not this valley. But more people could get hurt in the meantime," Penelope pointed out. "The Petersons are just the beginning." Before Owen could respond, Sheriff Whitaker approached them. "Taylor, I need you at that meeting. We're moving up our timetable. We ride for Prosperity Junction at first light." "I'll be there," Owen confirmed. After the sheriff moved on, Penelope gripped Owen's arm. "I'm coming with you tomorrow." "Absolutely not," Owen said immediately. "It's too dangerous." "It's dangerous for me here too," Penelope argued. "And I refuse to sit waiting while you ride into potential ambush. Besides, this is as much about me as it is about you. I have a right to face Garner." Owen studied her face, clearly torn between his desire to protect her and his recognition of her determination. "Penelope, if anything happened to you, nothing will happen," she insisted. "Not if we stick together. You said it yourself, together, or not at all." The conflict played across Owen's features for several long moments before he finally nodded. "All right, but you stay with me at all times and you follow my instructions without question if trouble starts." "Agreed," Penelope said, relief flooding through her. The meeting at the sheriff's office was crowded and tense. 20 men had volunteered for the ride to Prosperity Junction, each with his own reason for standing against Garner. Some had businesses threatened by his expansion. Others had friends or family who had been intimidated or harmed. All shared a determination to end his reign of terror over the valley. Sheriff Whitaker laid out the plan. They would ride in formation, armed but peaceful, to deliver their message directly to Garner. The show of unified strength was intended to make him reconsider his tactics, at least until the federal marshal arrived. "This is not a war party," the sheriff emphasized. "We're not looking for a fight. But we will make it clear that River Spend and the surrounding homesteads are under our protection." When Whitaker announced that Penelope would be joining them, there were a few raised eyebrows but no outright objections. In the frontier, women who showed courage were respected, not sheltered. As the meeting broke up, Reverend Phillips approached Owen and Penelope. "Given the circumstances, I wonder if you might consider moving the wedding forward," he suggested. "We could hold the ceremony tomorrow evening after you return from Prosperity Junction." Owen looked to Penelope, leaving the decision to her. "I'd prefer that," she admitted. "I don't want to wait any longer than necessary to be your wife." The Reverend smiled. "Then it's settled. I'll inform Mrs. Holloway. She'll be disappointed to have less time for preparations, but I think she'll understand the urgency." That night, Penelope found sleep elusive. The thought of confronting Garner filled her with both dread and a strange determination. This man had attempted to lure her into a trap, had threatened the community that had welcomed her, and had specifically targeted the man she loved. It was time to face him directly, to show him she wasn't afraid. A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Opening it cautiously, she found Owen standing there, his expression serious. "I couldn't sleep," he explained as she let him in. "Kept thinking about tomorrow." "Me too," Penelope admitted. Owen took her hands, his grip warm and reassuring. "There's something I need to tell you before we ride out. Something about my history with Garner that you should know." Penelope nodded, sensing this was important. "Tell me." 3 years ago, before Ethan died, we discovered Garner was using one of the line shacks on our property as a way station for opium shipments, Owen began. His men had killed a young Chinese man who worked for us when he stumbled upon their operation. Ethan and I tracked them back to Prosperity Junction and brought evidence to the territorial authorities. That's what got his man sentenced to prison, Penelope recalled from Sheriff Whitaker's explanation. Yes, the man's name was Jeb Fuller. He was Garner's right-hand man and his cousin. He died of tuberculosis 8 months into his sentence. Owen's expression darkened. But there's more. Fuller was engaged to marry Garner's sister. After he died, she took her own life. The implication struck Penelope immediately. "So Garner blames you not just for his cousin's imprisonment, but for his sister's death as well." Owen nodded grimly. "It's personal for him. That's why he won't stop easily, and that's why I'm worried about you being with me tomorrow. His hatred runs deep." "All the more reason we face him together," Penelope said firmly. "United, not divided." Owen studied her face, his eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You continue to amaze me, Penelope Sutter. Most women would be looking for the first stagecoach out of here." "I'm not most women," she reminded him. "And I've already tried running away once. It didn't solve anything." Owen pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow evening after we return, you'll be my wife," he murmured. "No matter what happens with Garner, that thought gives me strength." "Me too," Penelope whispered. "Now go get some rest. Dawn will be here soon enough." After a brief, tender kiss, Owen reluctantly withdrew. At the door, he paused, looking back at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I love you, Penelope, more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," she replied softly, "now and always." As the door closed behind him, Penelope turned to the window, gazing out at the quiet town below. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and, she hoped, resolution. And then, finally, she and Owen could begin their life together without the shadow of Harold Garner hanging over them. Dawn broke gray and misty over River Spend. The weather matched the mood somber, tense, expectant. Penelope dressed carefully in her most practical riding clothes, her hair braided and pinned securely under a hat. In her pocket, she carried the pearl ring Owen had given her, unwilling to risk losing it if trouble erupted. The town square was filled with mounted men when she arrived, led by Henry on one of Owen's horses. Despite the doctor's protests, the foreman had insisted on joining the party. "Can't let you two face this alone," he said gruffly, when Penelope expressed concern about his health. "Been with the Taylor family too long to back down now." Owen helped Penelope mount her horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Stay close to me," he reminded her. Sheriff Whitaker addressed the assembled group, his voice carrying in the still morning air. "Remember, we're delivering a message, not starting a war. Keep your weapons holstered unless I give the order. Let me do the talking when we reach Prosperity Junction." With that, he led them out of town, 22 riders moving at a steady pace through the misty landscape. Penelope rode beside Owen, with Henry just behind them. The journey to Prosperity Junction would take about 3 hours at their current pace, bringing them into town around mid-morning. As they rode, the fog began to lift, revealing a landscape transformed by spring. Wildflowers dotted the grasslands, and the distant mountains stood sharp against the clearing sky. Under different circumstances, it would have been a beautiful ride. "Nervous?" Owen asked quietly as they crested a small rise. Penelope considered the question honestly. "Yes," she admitted, "but also resolute. Whatever happens today, it's better than living in fear of what Garner might do next." Owen nodded in understanding. "My father used to say that courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling it and moving forward anyway." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Owen agreed. "Simple in his ways but profound in his thinking. Like when he first brought my mother home. People didn't understand a white man with a half-Cheyenne wife, but he never wavered, never apologized for loving her. Said the heart knows what it wants, and only a fool argues with his own heart." Penelope smiled at the sentiment. "I think I would have liked your father very much." "He would have adored you," Owen assured her. "Strong women run in our family by blood or by marriage." The easy conversation helped calm Penelope's nerves as they continued their journey. By the time Prosperity Junction came into view, the sun was high in a cloudless sky, and her initial anxiety had transformed into steady determination. The town was larger than Riverspend, but had a rougher, more chaotic appearance. Where Riverspend had been built according to some semblance of a plan, Prosperity Junction had clearly grown haphazardly, with buildings of varying sizes and states of repair crowded along a winding main street. Several saloons were already doing business despite the early hour, and women in gaudy dresses loitered on balconies, calling to potential customers. Sheriff Whitaker led them straight down the center of town, their arrival drawing curious and sometimes hostile stares from the inhabitants. They stopped in front of the largest building, a 2-story structure with ornate facades and large windows. A sign proclaimed it the Golden Palace Saloon and Hotel. "Garner's headquarters," Owen murmured to Penelope. "He runs everything from here." Whitaker dismounted, motioning for Owen to join him. After a moment's hesitation, Owen turned to Penelope. "Stay with Henry," he instructed. "I won't be long." Before she could protest, he was following the sheriff toward the saloon entrance. The rest of their party remained mounted, forming a protective circle around the building. The minutes stretched endlessly as Penelope waited. Around them, the town had grown unusually quiet, as if holding its breath. Faces appeared in windows, watching the standoff with wary interest. Finally, the saloon doors swung open. Sheriff Whitaker emerged first, his expression grim. Behind him came Owen, walking stiffly as if controlling his anger. And behind Owen came a man Penelope had seen only once before, at a distance, Harold Garner. He was taller than she remembered, with a lean build and the carefully groomed appearance of a man who valued appearances. His suit was clearly expensive, his boots polished to a high shine. But it was his eyes that caught and held Penelope's attention, cold, calculating, and filled with a malice that sent a chill down her spine. Garner's gaze swept over the assembled riders, pausing when he spotted Penelope. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. "Miss Sutter," he called, his voice carrying easily in the hushed street. "I'm flattered you came all this way to see me. Have you reconsidered my offer of employment?" Owen's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, but Sheriff Whitaker placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Mr. "Garner," Whitaker said loudly, reclaiming everyone's attention. "As I explained inside, we're here to deliver a message from the citizens of Riverspend and the surrounding homesteads. The attacks on Owen Taylor's ranch and the Peterson property will not be tolerated. A federal marshal is en route and will be investigating these incidents upon arrival." Garner seemed unconcerned by this announcement. "Tragic accidents, Sheriff. Spring is a dangerous time. Lightning strikes, equipment malfunctions. I fail to see how any of that concerns me or my business interests." "We know what you're doing, Garner," Owen spoke up, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Trying to drive people out before the railroad survey team arrives. It won't work." "Railroad?" Garner raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Taylor. Though I do know something about debts of honor, debts that remain unpaid." His gaze shifted back to Penelope. "Miss Sutter, you're keeping unfortunate company. Did Taylor tell you about his role in my family's tragedy, or did he conveniently omit that detail while playing the gallant rescuer?" "I know everything I need to know," Penelope replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Including the kind of man you are." Garner's expression hardened. "The kind of man I am. I'm a businessman, Miss Sutter. One who recognizes potential when he sees it. You were wasted as a seamstress. In my establishment, a woman of your attributes could do very well indeed." Owen moved so quickly that even Sheriff Whitaker couldn't stop him. In 2 strides, he was face to face with Garner, his voice low but carrying in the tense silence. "Speak to my fiancée like that again, and marshal or no marshal, I'll end you where you stand." For a moment, the 2 men locked gazes, the hatred between them almost palpable. Then Garner stepped back, raising his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. "Fiancée, my congratulations." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "When is the happy day?" "None of your concern," Sheriff Whitaker cut in, physically positioning himself between the 2 men. "What should concern you is this. The citizens of Riverspend are united against your attempts to intimidate and control this valley. The attacks stop now, or there will be consequences beyond what any territorial judge can protect you from." Garner surveyed the mounted men surrounding his saloon, his expression calculating. "An impressive show of force, Sheriff, but temporary, I think. These men have ranches to run, businesses to attend to. They can't stand guard indefinitely." "Long enough for the marshal to arrive," Whitaker countered, "and to mount a proper investigation. Your influence has its limits, Garner." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Garner's face. The mention of a federal investigation clearly concerned him more than local resistance. "I'll take your message under advisement," he said finally. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." He turned to go, then paused, looking back at Penelope. "Miss Sutter, should you ever tire of frontier life, my offer remains open. Some women find civilization more to their taste than the primitive existence of a rancher's wife." Before Owen could react to the taunt, Penelope spoke up. "Mr. Garner, I've seen what passes for civilization in your world, and I want no part of it. I chose Owen freely, just as I choose to stand with these people against your tyranny." A murmur of approval ran through the assembled riders. Garner's face darkened momentarily before he mastered his expression. "As you wish," he said coldly, "but remember, choices have consequences. For everyone." With that ominous statement hanging in the air, he turned and re-entered the saloon. Sheriff Whitaker wasted no time. "Mount up," he ordered Owen. "We've delivered our message. Let's not overstay our welcome." The ride back to Riverspend was tense, with every rider alert for potential ambush. But they encountered no trouble, arriving back in town by mid-afternoon to find preparations for the wedding well underway, despite the abbreviated timeline. Mrs. Holloway immediately whisked Penelope away for final dress fittings, clucking over her like a mother hen. Getting married after confronting that dreadful man, it's the most romantic thing I've ever heard. Though terribly foolish, she added, expertly pinning a loose seam. Still, that's love for you, equal parts courage and lunacy. Penelope couldn't help but smile at the assessment. I'm beginning to think you're right. As the afternoon faded into evening, Penelope found herself in the small room above the church that served as the reverend's study, now temporarily converted into a bridal chamber. The wedding dress fit perfectly after Mrs. Holloway's skillful alterations. Someone had provided a small bouquet of wildflowers tied with a blue ribbon, something borrowed, something blue, the mayor's wife had explained. A knock at the door announced Henry, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt and polished boots. "It's time, Miss Penelope," he said gruffly. "Owen's waiting." "Will you walk me down the aisle, Henry?" Penelope asked impulsively. "I have no family here, and you're the closest thing to a father figure either of us has." The weathered foreman's eyes glistened suspiciously. "Be an honor," he managed, offering his arm. The church was filled to capacity, with seemingly the entire population of Riverspend in attendance. Lanterns and candles illuminated the simple space, casting a warm glow over the wooden pews. As Penelope entered on Henry's arm, all heads turned, but she had eyes only for Owen. He stood at the altar beside Reverend Phillips, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in a new shirt and clean black trousers. His face as he watched her approach was a study in wonder and love so pure it brought tears to her eyes. The ceremony itself was brief, but meaningful. They exchanged simple vows, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days. When Owen slipped the pearl ring back onto her finger, now joined by a simple gold band that had belonged to his father, Penelope felt a sense of rightness and completion she had never known before. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Phillips declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Owen's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a pledge of all that was to come. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, the church erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed at the hotel was joyous despite the shadow of Garner's threats. Food and drink flowed freely. Music filled the air, and for a few precious hours, the concerns of the outside world seemed far away. It was near midnight when Sheriff Whittaker approached them, his expression apologetic for interrupting their happiness. "Just wanted to let you know we've doubled the watch tonight," he said quietly. "No one's taking any chances after this morning's confrontation." Owen nodded in appreciation. "Any word on when the marshal will arrive?" "Telegraph came through while you were exchanging vows," Whittaker replied. "He should be here day after tomorrow, bringing 2 deputies with him." "Good," Owen said. "The sooner this is resolved, the sooner we can get back to rebuilding the ranch." Whittaker hesitated, then added, "You two should consider staying in town until this is over. The hotel's secure and there are plenty of eyes watching." Owen looked to Penelope, clearly leaving the decision to her. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "That seems wise." But just until the marshal has dealt with Garner. Later, alone in the hotel room that now belonged to both of them, Owen took Penelope in his arms. "Not exactly the wedding night I'd planned," he said ruefully, glancing around the simple room. "I'd hoped to take you home to our cabin." "Home is wherever you are," Penelope told him, resting her hands against his chest. "Besides, this is just the beginning. We have a lifetime of nights ahead of us." Owen's smile was tender as he cupped her face in his hands. "A lifetime that almost didn't happen. If I hadn't found you that day at the river." "But you did," she reminded him. You said if I went, I'd take your soul too, and somehow you gave me back mine instead." His kiss was answer enough, deep and passionate, a sealing of the promises they had made before God and their newfound community. Whatever challenges lay ahead Garner, rebuilding the ranch, the uncertainties of frontier life, they would face them together, two souls now bound as one. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect spring day that seemed to mirror Penelope's inner joy. She woke wrapped in Owen's arms, the reality of being his wife filling her with a contentment she had never thought to experience. They breakfasted in the hotel dining room, accepting congratulations and well wishes from what seemed like an endless parade of townspeople. News traveled fast in small communities, and their wedding had apparently been the most exciting event in Riversbend for months. "Mrs. Taylor," Owen said quietly during a rare moment alone, testing the name on his tongue. "I think I could spend the rest of my life getting used to calling you that." Penelope smiled, still adjusting to the new name herself. "I plan to hold you to that, Mr. Taylor." Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Whitaker, his expression grave. "Taylor, Mrs. Taylor," he greeted them. "I hate to disturb you, but we've got a situation." Owen immediately tensed. "Garner," the sheriff nodded. "A rider just came in from the Eastern Trail. Spotted about 15 men heading this way, armed. The description matches Garner's usual crew." "When?" Owen demanded, already pushing back from the table. "There may be 2 hours out, moving steady but not rushing." Whitaker glanced at Penelope. "I've already started organizing our defenses. Mayor's calling a town meeting in 15 minutes at the church." The meeting was tense but orderly. Mayor Clark outlined the situation while Sheriff Whitaker detailed his defensive plan. Women and children would gather at the church, which had the sturdiest construction in town. Men would take up positions throughout Riversbend, with the heaviest concentration at the eastern approach. "We anticipated Garner might try something before the marshal arrives," Whitaker explained. "But I didn't expect him to move this quickly or with this many men." "He's desperate," Owen suggested. "Our show of force yesterday threatened his control. He needs to reassert it before the federal authorities arrive." "What does he want?" someone called out. "Is it just Taylor and his wife, or is he coming for all of us?" Owen stood to address the question. "Garner wants control of the valley, of the future railroad, of every business and transaction from here to the territorial border. My wife and I may be the immediate targets of his vendetta, but make no mistake, if he succeeds here, none of you will be safe." A murmur of agreement ran through the gathering. "We don't negotiate with men like Garner," Mayor Clark declared firmly. "Riversbend stands together." As the meeting broke up and people hurried to their assigned positions, Penelope pulled Owen aside. "I should be with the other women at the church," she said, though it clearly pained her to suggest separation. Owen shook his head. "Garner's coming for you specifically. The church would be the first place he'd look. You stay with me." "But I'll only be a distraction," Penelope argued. "You'll be worried about protecting me instead of focusing on the fight." "There's no place in this town where I wouldn't worry about you," Owen countered. "At least if you're with me, I'll know exactly where you are and that you're safe." Sheriff Whitaker approached them before Penelope could respond. "Taylor's right," he said, having overheard the exchange. "You two are Garner's primary targets. I want you both at the hotel. It's defensible, has clear sight lines in all directions, and we've got men positioned on the roof and in the surrounding buildings." With the decision made for her, Penelope followed Owen and the sheriff back to the hotel. The town had transformed in the short time since the meeting ended. Streets that had been bustling with activity were now eerily empty. Shutters were closed tight on windows, and armed men moved purposefully into defensive positions. At the hotel, Mrs. Holloway was calmly organizing supplies, water buckets in case of fire, bandages and medicines for potential injuries, extra ammunition for the defenders. Just like during the Sioux uprising in '67, she explained when she saw Penelope's surprised expression. Not my first siege, dear. The next hour passed with agonizing slowness. Owen paced the hotel lobby, checking and rechecking his weapons. Penelope helped Mrs. Holloway organize supplies, grateful for the distraction of purposeful work. Outside, the town waited in tense silence. The sound of approaching horses broke the quiet. From his position at the window, Owen counted aloud. 12, 13, 14 riders, Garner's in the lead. Sheriff Whitaker, who had been conferring with deputies at the far end of the room, joined Owen at the window. Fewer than we expected, but still too many for comfort. The riders stopped at the edge of town. Garner raised his hand and the men behind him halted. For a long moment he surveyed Riversbend as if assessing its defenses. Then, to everyone's surprise, he continued forward alone. "He's coming to talk," Sheriff Whitaker observed. "Didn't expect that." Garner rode slowly down the main street, stopping in front of the hotel. From inside, they could see him clearly sitting straight in his saddle, wearing the same expensive suit he'd had on the day before, looking more like a businessman than an outlaw. "Sheriff Whitaker," he called. "I know you're in there. I'd like to discuss terms." Whitaker glanced at Owen and Penelope. "Stay back," he instructed. "This could be a trap." He stepped onto the hotel porch, his hand resting casually on his holstered gun. "What terms, Garner? You have no authority here." Garner smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Authority is a fluid concept in these parts, Sheriff. Right now, I have 14 armed men who say I have plenty of authority. And I have twice that many positioned throughout town," Whitaker countered. "Plus a federal marshal due to arrive tomorrow. Your position isn't as strong as you think." "Perhaps," Garner conceded. "Which is why I'm proposing a civilized resolution. No bloodshed necessary. I'm listening." Garner adjusted his hat against the sun. "It's simple. Taylor and the woman come with me. In exchange, Riversbend remains untouched. My quarrel isn't with your town sheriff. It's with the man who cost me my family." "And what happens to them if they go with you?" Whitaker asked. Though the answer was obvious to everyone listening, Garner's smile turned cold. "Justice happens, Sheriff. The kind that doesn't concern you or your townspeople." Before Whitaker could respond, Owen stepped onto the porch beside him, ignoring the sheriff's attempt to hold him back. "That's not going to happen, Garner. Not now, not ever." "Ah, Taylor, there you are." Garner's gaze shifted beyond Owen, "and Mrs. Taylor, too. My congratulations again on your recent nuptials, though I fear your marriage will be tragically brief." "You've played your hand badly," Owen said, his voice steady despite the threat. "These people aren't intimidated by you, and when the marshal arrives tomorrow, your empire starts crumbling." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Garner's face. "The marshal may find his journey interrupted. Roads are dangerous this time of year." "He's traveling by train," Sheriff Whitaker informed him, "with 2 deputies, due in Riversbend tomorrow morning. Your time's running out, Garner." Penelope, who had been watching from just inside the doorway, stepped out onto the porch to stand beside Owen. "Mr. Garner," she called, her voice clear in the tense silence. "You speak of justice, but what you seek is vengeance. There's a difference." Garner's cold gaze fixed on her. "Is there, Mrs. Taylor? When a man loses his family because of another man's actions, the distinction seems academic." "Your cousin broke the law," Penelope reminded him. "He trafficked in opium that destroys lives. He killed an innocent man. His imprisonment was justice, not Owen's fault." "And my sister," Garner demanded, a crack appearing in his composed facade. Was her death justice too? Her death was a tragedy, Penelope acknowledged, but one of her own making, not Owen's. We all choose how we respond to loss. You chose hatred and vengeance, but there are other paths. A muscle twitched in Garner's jaw. Philosophical debates won't save you or your husband, Mrs. Taylor. My offer stands. Surrender yourselves and the town remains unharmed. And if we refuse? Owen asked, though he clearly already knew the answer. Garner's expression hardened. Then everyone pays the price for your stubbornness. He turned his horse, preparing to rejoin his men. You have 10 minutes to decide. As Garner rode back to his waiting men, Sheriff Whitaker ushered Owen and Penelope back inside the hotel. He's bluffing, the sheriff said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. He doesn't have enough men to take the town if we resist. But he has enough to cause significant damage before he stopped, Owen pointed out grimly. People will die. People might die either way, Whitaker countered. At least this way we fight on our terms, not his. Penelope, who had been silent since their exchange with Garner, suddenly spoke up. What if there's another option, a way to end this without bloodshed on either side? Both men turned to her in surprise. What are you suggesting? Owen asked. Garner's vendetta is personal, Penelope explained. He blames you for his family's destruction. What if we could show him he's wrong, that there's another way to honor his sister's memory? How? Sheriff Whitaker asked skeptically. Let me speak with him, alone. Absolutely not, Owen said immediately. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than a shootout in the middle of town, Penelope challenged. People will die, Owen, good people who have shown us nothing but kindness. Garner can't be reasoned with, Owen insisted. He's beyond that, maybe, Penelope conceded, but I have to try for all our sakes. She turned to Sheriff Whitaker. Would you arrange it? A meeting, just Garner and me in neutral territory. The middle of the street where both sides can see but not interfere. The sheriff considered her request thoughtfully. It's risky, but it might buy us time if nothing else. He looked to Owen. It's your call, Taylor. She's your wife. Owen's expression was tortured as he looked at Penelope. I can't lose you, he said simply. Not after everything we've been through. You won't lose me, Penelope promised, taking his hands. But I need to do this. Please trust me. The internal struggle was visible on Owen's face, his desire to protect her warring with his respect for her autonomy and judgment. Finally, he nodded, though the movement seemed to cause him physical pain. All right, but at the first sign of trouble, we intervene. Sheriff Whitaker wasted no time. He stepped back onto the porch, waving a white handkerchief to signal a parley. After a brief exchange, Garner agreed to meet Penelope alone in the center of the street. As Penelope prepared to leave the safety of the hotel, Owen pulled her into a fierce embrace. Be careful, he whispered against her hair. Remember what you said at the river, we're in this together. Your life is my life now. I remember, Penelope assured him. That's why I have to try. With a final kiss, she stepped away from him and out onto the porch. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, she began walking slowly toward the center of the street where Garner waited, having dismounted from his horse. The distance seemed enormous, though it was only about 30 yards. With each step, Penelope felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon her, the defenders of Riverspend watching from windows and rooftops, Garner's men observing from their positions at the edge of town. Garner himself stood impassively, his expression revealing nothing as she approached. When she stopped a few feet away from him, he tipped his hat with mocking politeness. Mrs. Taylor, this is an unexpected pleasure. Have you come to accept my terms? I've come to offer different ones, Penelope replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. Garner raised an eyebrow. I'm intrigued. What could you possibly offer that would interest me? Understanding, Penelope said simply. And perhaps a way for your sister's death to mean something beyond revenge. The mention of his sister caused Garner's carefully controlled expression to flicker. You know nothing about my sister, he said coldly. I know she loved a man who made bad choices, Penelope countered. I know she was so devastated by his loss that she took her own life, and I know what that kind of despair feels like. That caught Garner's attention. Do you? He asked skeptically. Yes, Penelope admitted. 6 weeks ago I stood in the Snake River intending to end my life. I had lost everything: family, reputation, future. The pain seemed unbearable. Yet here you stand, Garner observed. What changed? Someone found me, Penelope said simply. Someone who saw value in my life even when I couldn't see it myself. Someone who said, if you go, you take my soul too. Owen pulled me from that river, Mr. Garner. He saved me in every way a person can be saved. Garner's expression remained skeptical, but something in his eyes had softened slightly. A touching story, but it changes nothing. Taylor is still responsible for my family's destruction. No, Penelope said firmly. Your cousin's choices led to his imprisonment. Your sister's despair led to her death. Owen was merely upholding the law and protecting innocent lives. The opium your cousin trafficked destroys families, Mr. Garner. How many sisters have lost brothers? How many wives have lost husbands to that poison? For the first time, Garner seemed without an immediate response. His gaze drifted past Penelope to where Owen stood watching from the hotel porch. What are your terms? He finally asked. Leave this valley, Penelope said simply. Take your men and your business elsewhere. Let the people here live in peace. Garner laughed, though the sound held little humor. Just like that. Abandon everything I've built. Why would I do that? Because the alternative is destruction, Penelope replied. If not today, then tomorrow when the marshal arrives. Or the next day, or the next. This valley is changing, Mr. Garner. Families are coming, communities are growing. Your type of operation is becoming obsolete. My type of operation has thrived for centuries, Garner countered. Men will always seek certain pleasures, Mrs. Taylor. I merely provide the means. Then provide them somewhere else, Penelope suggested. Somewhere less visible to federal authorities. The railroad is coming, Mr. Garner. With it will come increased scrutiny, law enforcement, civilization. Your future here is limited regardless of what happens today. Garner studied her thoughtfully. And if I agree to your terms, what guarantee do I have that Taylor won't come after me for revenge of his own? You have my word, Penelope said. And his. We want peace, Mr. Garner. A chance to rebuild our lives without looking over our shoulders. For a long moment, Garner said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, to Penelope's surprise, he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, making him look younger and less hardened. You know, in different circumstances, I think I might have liked you, Mrs. Taylor, he said. You have courage. That's rare, especially in women. In my experience, Mr. Garner, courage is more common than you might think, especially in women. Garner laughed again, and this time the sound had actual warmth. Perhaps you're right. His expression sobered. I need to confer with my men. Wait here. As he walked back toward his waiting riders, Penelope remained where she was, vulnerable in the open street but unwilling to retreat before negotiations were complete. She could feel Owen's anxious gaze on her back, could sense his tension even at this distance. Garner spoke briefly with his men, his gestures animated. There appeared to be some disagreement, with several men shaking their heads vigorously. Finally, Garner raised his hand, silencing further discussion. He returned to where Penelope waited, his expression now carefully neutral. "My men think I'm making a mistake," he informed her. "They believe we should take what we want by force, that I'm showing weakness by even considering your proposal." Penelope's heart sank, but she kept her expression composed. "And what do you believe, Mr. Garner?" He sighed, suddenly looking tired. "I believe my sister would be disappointed in what I've become. Marion was always the gentle one, the one who saw the best in people." He glanced toward Owen again. "She wouldn't have wanted this vendetta, this bloodshed in her name." Hope flickered in Penelope's chest. "Then end it. Here, today." Garner was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with a decision that would change the course of many lives. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. "I will withdraw from Riverspend and the surrounding valley," he announced. "My operations in Prosperity Junction will continue for now, but I will not expand further in this direction." Relief washed over Penelope. "Thank you, Mr. Garner." He held up a hand. "I have conditions. First, Taylor must agree never to interfere with my business again, regardless of where it operates. Second, the marshal who arrives tomorrow must be informed that any investigation into the incidents at Taylor's ranch and the Peterson property will be fruitless. Evidence has a way of disappearing." "I believe those terms can be accepted," Penelope said carefully, "though I can only speak for myself and Owen, not for the marshal or the town." "Then speak with your husband," Garner suggested. "I'll wait." Penelope turned and walked back toward the hotel, feeling Garner's eyes on her back with every step. Owen met her halfway, unable to contain his anxiety any longer. "What happened?" he demanded in a low voice. "What did he say?" Quickly, Penelope relayed Garner's offer and his conditions. Owen's expression darkened at the mention of turning a blind eye to Garner's operations, but he didn't immediately reject the proposal. "It's not perfect," Penelope acknowledged, "but it prevents bloodshed today and gives us a chance at peace." Owen glanced over her shoulder at Garner, who waited impassively in the street. "Do you trust him to keep his word?" "I think he's tired," Penelope said honestly. "Tired of carrying his sister's death as a justification for hatred. This gives him a way to step back without losing face." After a moment's consideration, Owen nodded. "All right, we accept his terms, but I want Sheriff Whitaker to witness the agreement." They returned to Garner together, accompanied by the sheriff. The three men regarded each other warily, years of antagonism not easily set aside. "Taylor," Garner acknowledged, "your wife is quite the negotiator." "She's quite a woman in every respect," Owen replied. "One I'll protect with my life if necessary." Garner inclined his head. "That won't be necessary if we all honor our agreement. You stay out of my business, I stay out of your valley. Simple enough." "And the attacks stop," Sheriff Whitaker added firmly. "No more intimidation, no more threats. That includes the town of Riverspend and all the surrounding homesteads." "Agreed," Garner said. "Though I can't speak for others who might find this valley attractive for development. The railroad brings all types." "We'll handle legitimate competition," Whitaker assured him. "It's your particular brand of business we object to." With the terms clarified, the men shook hands not as friends, but as adversaries agreeing to a truce. Garner turned to Penelope with a final nod of respect. "I hope your husband appreciates what he has in you, Mrs. Taylor." "He does," Owen answered for himself. "More than you could possibly understand." Garner's smile was tinged with something like regret. "Perhaps." He turned away, mounting his horse in one fluid motion. With a signal to his men, he began to ride out of town, his small army following behind. The citizens of Riverspend watched in stunned silence as Garner's men departed without firing a single shot. When the last rider had disappeared from view, a cheer erupted, people emerging from their defensive positions to embrace one another in relief and celebration. Owen pulled Penelope into his arms, holding her as if he might never let go. "You amazing, reckless, brilliant woman," he murmured against her hair. "Do you have any idea how terrified I was?" "About as terrified as I was," Penelope admitted, her composure finally cracking now that the danger had passed. She trembled in his embrace, the full impact of what she had done hitting her all at once. Sheriff Whitaker approached them, shaking his head in wonder. "Mrs. Taylor, I've been enforcing the law in this territory for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what you just accomplished. Garner's never backed down before, not once." "He's still human," Penelope said simply. "Beneath all that hatred and ambition, there's still a brother who loved his sister. I just needed to remind him of that." The celebration that followed made their wedding festivities seem subdued by comparison. The entire town gathered in the street, sharing food and drink, music and laughter. The shadow that had hung over Riverspend had lifted, at least for now, and the relief was palpable. As evening fell, Owen and Penelope found a quiet moment alone on the hotel porch, watching the celebration continue in the street below. "What happens now?" Penelope asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Owen's arm tightened around her. "Now we rebuild. The barn first, then maybe expand the cabin a bit. Henry's been talking about adding a proper cook stove for years. And after that," Owen smiled down at her, "after that we live, Penelope. We fill that cabin with love and laughter and maybe, when you're ready, the patter of little feet." The thought of children, their children, filled Penelope with a warmth that spread through her entire being. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Very much." Owen kissed her gently, then more deeply, unconcerned with the townsfolk who might see them. When they finally parted, his eyes shone with love and promise. "You saved more than yourself when you decided to live that day in the river," he told her. "You saved me too. And today, you saved this entire town." Penelope shook her head. "We saved each other, Owen. That's what marriage is, two souls becoming stronger together than they ever could be apart." As darkness fell completely, stars appeared above them, the same stars that had witnessed their first night together after the river. But now, everything had changed. The woman who had sought death in those waters had found instead a life worth living, a love worth fighting for, and a strength within herself she had never known existed. And the cowboy who had once stood at the edge of his own cliff had found not just a reason to live, but a partner to share that life with, a woman whose courage and compassion had transformed not just his world, but an entire community. Together, they would build their future in this wild, beautiful land that had both tested and blessed them. And whenever the river caught the sunlight just so, they would remember the day that had brought them together, the day when a desperate act had led to the greatest love either could have imagined. "If you go, you take my soul too," Owen had said that fateful day. But in the end, neither of them had gone. Instead, they had found in each other the healing, the purpose, and the love that made every struggle worthwhile. As they returned to the celebration hand in hand, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two souls now bound as one, stronger for having been broken, and determined to make every day of their shared life count. 5 years later, the Taylor ranch had transformed. The new barn, larger and sturdier than its predecessor, stood proudly beside a cabin that had nearly doubled in size. A vegetable garden flourished behind a picket fence designed to keep out rabbits, and apple trees still young but promising lined the path to the front door. On the porch, Penelope sat in a rocking chair, watching as Owen taught their 4-year-old son, Ethan, to ride his first pony. The boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard, matched by the happy babbling of his 2-year-old sister, Marion, who played at Penelope's feet. Henry, now moving more slowly but still an essential part of their lives, emerged from the barn leading a horse. "Mail's here," he called, holding up a bundle of letters. Owen lifted Ethan from the pony and carried him over to the porch, the boy perched proudly on his father's shoulders. "Anything interesting?" he asked as Henry handed the correspondence to Penelope. "Letter from Mrs. Holloway," Penelope noted, sorting through the stack, "and one from the school board in Riversbend. Oh, and a newspaper from Cheyenne." She unfolded the newspaper, scanning the headlines. Her eyes widened at a small article on the second page. "Owen, listen to this. Harold Garner, once notorious operator of gambling and opium enterprises in Wyoming Territory, has donated a substantial sum to establish a rehabilitation home for those suffering from opium addiction. The facility, to be named the Marion Garner Memorial Home, will provide treatment and support for individuals seeking to overcome dependency." Owen sat beside her, taking the newspaper to read the article himself. "Well, I'll be damned," he murmured, mindful of little ears. "Never thought I'd see the day." "People can change," Penelope said softly, watching as Ethan climbed down to play with his sister. "Sometimes they just need a reason." Owen's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "You've always believed in the best in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves." Penelope smiled, thinking of how far they had come from that desperate day by the river. The pain that had driven her there seemed like a lifetime ago, belonging to someone else entirely. "The school board wants me to consider expanding my teaching to include older students," she said, returning to the letters. "They're talking about building a proper academy in Riversbend now that the railroads brought so many new families." "Are you interested?" Owen asked. He had always supported her work at the school, taking pride in the difference she made in the community. Penelope considered the question, watching their children play. "Perhaps in a year or two when Marion's a bit older. For now, I'm content with my 2 days a week teaching the younger children." "No rush," Owen agreed. "We have all the time in the world." And they did. The years since their confrontation with Garner had been largely peaceful. The railroad had indeed come to the valley, bringing growth and prosperity to Riversbend. Their ranch had flourished, with Owen's careful management and Henry's steadfast assistance. They had built a life together that neither could have imagined that fateful day by the river. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in gold and purple, Owen gathered Ethan in one arm and Marion in the other. "Time to get these little wranglers washed up for dinner," he announced. Penelope watched them go inside, her heart full to bursting with love for her family. After a moment, she rose to follow, pausing at the doorway to look back at the valley spread out before her, the land that had become her home, the place where she had found herself, and the life she had nearly thrown away. "Thank you," she whispered, though to whom, she wasn't entirely sure. Perhaps to Owen, perhaps to God, perhaps to the river itself that had carried her not to death, but to a new beginning. Inside, the cabin was warm with love and laughter, the sounds of her family, Owen's deep voice, the children's excited chatter, even Henry's occasional gruff comments creating a symphony that Penelope never tired of hearing. Later that night, with the children asleep and Henry retired to his small cabin nearby, Owen and Penelope sat on the porch, enjoying the cool evening air and the brilliant canopy of stars above. "You ever think about it?" Owen asked quietly. "The river?" Penelope nodded, knowing exactly what he meant. "Sometimes, not with regret but with gratitude. If I hadn't reached that point of despair, we might never have found each other." Owen's arm tightened around her shoulders. I still remember the exact moment I saw you in those waters. Something in me just knew if I lost you, I'd lose part of myself too, even though we'd never met. Our souls recognized each other, Penelope said, echoing words he had spoken years before, as if they had always known we belonged together. Owen turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. I know we don't usually mark the day, but I realized this morning it's been exactly 5 years since I found you in the river. Penelope caught her breath, surprised that the date had slipped past her notice. 5 years, she repeated softly. It feels like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. I have something for you, Owen said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small box, offering it to her with a slightly nervous smile. I've been saving for it ever since Ethan was born. Curious, Penelope opened the box. Inside lay a delicate gold necklace with a pendant, a small pearl, similar to the one in her wedding ring, surrounded by tiny blue stones that caught the moonlight. The pearl is for the beauty that comes from adversity, Owen explained as he fastened it around her neck. And the sapphires are for the river that brought us together. Tears welled in Penelope's eyes as she touched the pendant. It's beautiful, Owen. Perfect. Like you, he said simply, drawing her into his arms. Every day I thank God for sending me to that riverbank at exactly the right moment. As they held each other under the vast Wyoming sky, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from despair to hope, from loneliness to family, from a moment of intended ending to a lifetime of new beginnings. If you go, you take my soul too, Owen had said that day. But what neither of them had known then was that by staying, by choosing life and love over darkness, they would create something far greater than either could have imagined alone, a legacy of love that would ripple outward like the waters of that fateful river, touching lives far beyond their own. And in the end, that was the true miracle of their story, not just that two broken souls had found healing in each other, but that their healing had created ripples of hope and change that continued to spread, touching their children, their community, and even, in some small way, a man who had once been their enemy. As Owen kissed her beneath the stars, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, not at the end of her story, but in the middle of a beautiful journey that had begun the moment a desperate woman and a determined cowboy had met at the edge of a river, and two souls had recognized their other half.